In Section 4, we're starting to move a little bit further down the supply chain, getting closer and closer to the actual activity of customs clearance. And speaking about supply chain activities that impact the clearance process, let's talk about sourcing, which of course is a module we dedicated quite a bit of time to. We'll be tying back to that module throughout the balance of Module 9. Because the sourcing function engages in activities as diverse as selecting countries to source from, to negotiating the unit price of products with vendors, its impact on customs clearance procedures is substantial. Just in that one-sentence statement, we can see things like country of origin coming into play. The price negotiated or price paid or payable that we spoke of earlier for valuation purposes, all of it comes to light. First sub-bullet. Depending on what country or countries an item is sourced from, the customs duties could be different. We've said this already. Country of origin in the United States matters for duty assessment. Our flashlight example, let's use it again. The same flashlight made in the Philippines versus Costa Rica could have a very different customs duty associated with it. Sourcing makes the decisions about where stuff is bought. That's a direct impact on customs clearance and subsequent activities. Second sub-bullet, the unit cost that sourcing negotiates with a vendor has a direct impact on the valuation of an imported product. Let's switch away from flashlights and talk about footwear. The negotiation for a pair of shoes coming out of Cambodia versus Europe, the unit cost is likely to be substantially different. The unit cost plays a big role in the valuation of the merchandise, the price actually paid or payable. So again, that's going to impact the customs clearance process. Changing up our look at sourcing a little bit, consider this. If the sourcing department agrees to provide overseas vendors with any kind of production support, the value of that support must be included in the valuation of an imported product. This is known as an assist. We'll see an example of an assist in just a moment. We'll talk about it later on, but it has an implication for sourcing, so we want to introduce it now. If we as the importer provide any type of support, and we'll see what we mean by support in just one second, the value of that support, that assist that we give to the vendor, has to be included in the value of the imported merchandise. As such, it's going to impact the customs clearance process in that the value of the imported good is going to be higher if we indeed provide an assist. Let's see what an assist is. Sub-bullet, materials, components, or parts incorporated in the imported merchandise. Second sub-bullet, this is an important one, and we have an example of it in just one second. Tools, dies, or molds used in the production of the imported product. And then engineering, development, artwork, design work, plans or sketches, but undertaken outside the U.S. Sourcing professionals, customs compliance professionals have to be aware of these types of activities and be sure to include their value when required in the valuation of the imported item. As a note, of course, assists will be dealt with in detail in an upcoming section of this model. Let's put out a real-world example for now to help illustrate just what we're talking about. And of course, our real-world example is aptly entitled, What's an Assist? You work as the VP of Logistics and Trade Compliance for a large importer of athletic footwear. Historically, your company has done all of the design work for new styles and shoe models and left all manufacturing considerations to overseas suppliers. In a change of strategy, the Senior Vice President of Sourcing informs you that the company will be providing the molds that will be used by the vendors to make a new line of high-end sneakers. The SVP wants to know what an assist is and how it might impact the new strategy. What do you tell her? Well, before we tell her anything, let's say that this is not a hypothetical situation. It's not unusual at all, especially in the high-end sneaker business, for design companies, for marketing companies that sell the shoes in the U.S. to provide the molds, very expensive molds, to a vendor or vendors overseas. not a hypothetical situation at all. Second paragraph. In this case, the assist is the mold or molds being provided to the overseas suppliers that will be used in the direct manufacturing of the sneakers. Because an assist is related to the valuation aspect of the customs process, said assist must be accounted for in the unit cost of the new sneakers, because it is the unit cost that's going to drive customs valuation, the price paid or payable. In this case, an assist becomes part of that price paid or payable. To illustrate this point, if the value of the molds is $2 million and they are capable of making 1 million pairs of sneakers before having to be replaced, the prorated value of the assist would be $2 per pair. 2 million divided by a million, $2 a pair. That's a prorated valuation. Second sentence, last paragraph. In a case where the unit price of a pair of sneakers is $50, the price paid to the vendor, the prorated value of the assist would have to be added, thus bringing the unit cost to $50 per pair. As can be seen, this type of sourcing decision has a very real impact on the valuation of the sneakers for customs purposes. Assists are a complex subject in the world of customs and border protection. We wanted to illustrate how customs clearance activities related to valuation in this instance really are influenced by upstream activities like sourcing. We'll see lots more detail about a multitude of subjects as we move forward. Continuing on with sourcing, other sourcing functions that can impact the classification and valuation of goods include, and think about this, in addition to the unit price, the minimum order quantity, MOQ, negotiated with a foreign vendor for an item will drive the value of the item. The more we buy overseas from a vendor, the greater the likelihood that we'll get better pricing. The minimum order quantity is what starts that pricing, likely to be the highest price. As such, if we're placing minimum orders on vendors, that higher unit cost will influence the amount of duties that we pay. Another angle to look at, second sub-bullet, any quantity discounts negotiated by sourcing will also determine the value of an imported product. This is related to minimum order quantity, but if we're not placing minimum orders and placing very large orders, that will drive down the unit cost and drive down any customs duties that we might have to pay. And then finally, CPQ, case pack quantity agreed upon with a vendor can influence the value of the merchandise as well. How much goes into a carton is what we're talking about here, because many vendors will not sell single items. Purchases must be made in case pack quantity, and every case has a price. Starting to wrap up our conversation on the influence of sourcing on customs clearance, these other functions that can impact C&V, classification and valuation, include, and here's an entirely different angle to consider, because U.S. customs duties are assessed only on the FOB value of imported merchandise, the Incoterms rule negotiated by sourcing with a supplier could falsely inflate a product's valuation. FOB value means essentially the unit cost. It's a little bit more than that. We'll get into it later, but that's what we're essentially talking about. In the United States, customs duties are not paid, for example, on unit cost plus international transportation. It's just the FOB value, meaning the value of the goods at the point of export. As such, sub-bullet, a product's value that includes international transportation will adversely inflate the valuation of that product and result in overpaying of duties. Once again, Incoterms rules are a pervasive topic in international trade, here in sourcing, and ultimately in the valuation of merchandise. Pay attention to Incoterms rules because in the U.S., duties are paid on the FOB value of the goods only. Let's illustrate this point with a real-world example, how Incoterms can inflate product valuation. You recently took a job as Director of Imports for a startup that sells cloud-based home security systems. The entire organization is populated by engineers and app developers, and they know very little about international shipping or compliance with U.S. CBP regulations. Second paragraph. In analyzing the documentation related to some recent customs entries, you notice that the company buys from vendors under the Incoterms Rule CPT Dallas Warehouse, carriage paid to Dallas Warehouse, and that the value of the goods for customs clearance purposes included the cost of international transportation. What does that mean, and how do you explain the ramifications to the CEO? Well, the first thing we can say, in very succinct terms, is that because we're including international transportation in the value of our imported goods, we can confidently make the statement that we're paying too much in customs duties. Let's go into some more detail on that. Third paragraph. First off, the CPT Incoterms Rule means that the vendor pays for transportation up to a named place at destination, carriage paid to. However, U.S. CBP regulations state that for purposes of paying customs duties, international transportation should not be included in the value of a product. Remember, the FOB value is what we're interested in. Therefore, in this case, the company has inflated the value of the security systems by the prorated value of the international transportation, and as such, paid more in customs duties than required. The company can try to refile past entries, but in the future should back out, and that's an actual term that is used, the value of international transportation when determining the dutiable value of its imported goods. A very good example of how sourcing that negotiates, among other things, Incoterms rules can impact downstream customs activities. This happens way more than you might imagine. Pay attention to these things. Okay, that's it for this section. When we come back, we'll just continue on our detailed conversation, picking up with master production scheduling. See you then.